Okay, welcome back. And I have a habit of not finishing things I start, so I want to just take a break today from doing the lens testing stuff that I've been doing recently and go back to the workflow stuff that I was talking about before. So this will be the final video that I'm going to do on this subject of workflow. I'll put a link in the description below of the previous two videos that I talked about workflow. Just a quick recap was first video was really about this idea of thinking about workflow before you even pick up a camera. So I think a lot of people think about workflow from just a pure post processing perspective, which is what we're going to do today. But the first video I wanted to just try and get people to start thinking a little bit more about, you know, your approach to that project, whatever you're going to do, that kind of shoot. So thinking about things like lens choices and the kind of vibe that you want to go for in your shoot and all of those sorts of things. I go into a lot more detail about that stuff in the first video. Second video is about whether you really need to edit at all. It's about this argument, the idea of just shooting sook, which is straight out of camera, and PSOOK, which stands for partial sook. So check out that video as well. Um, Not everything has to be a masterpiece, and certainly what I'm going to show you today is not what I do all the time. Photography is, it's wide and varied, and there are sometimes I know that I'm going to take a shot and it's going to need a lot of editing, maybe 45 minutes, an hour's worth of work just for one image. Sometimes it's 20 seconds. It really just depends on what I'm doing. Um, but I think there seems to be some confusion for people about why you might use something like Photoshop, and that's what we're going to really sort of work on today and sort of try and explain the times I feel as though I need to actually step even more than Lightroom and into something like Photoshop. It's not necessarily that Lightroom can't do these things as well. It just feels as though it can be a bit quicker and a bit tidier with doing this kind of process in Photoshop. So let's get straight into it. All right, so before we just jump into Photoshop, I just wanted to just quickly explain what I would use Lightroom for. So sometimes if you're doing something like event work, then I think it's important to get a kind of consistency across some of the work from that day, from that kind of event work. So for example, just this wedding here, these kind of orangey evening shots here, I would have chosen a particular render in Lightroom. I would have maybe got it looking good for one image, and then I would start to synchronize that look and retouch each of the other images there. What I chose to work with at this hour of the day would have not have necessarily been the same one that I used up here during the day for the garden shots, or in the morning, the ceremony shot. So sometimes you can find a render that works across lots and lots and lots the whole day. Sometimes it feels like one works really, really nice for a certain light situation that you're in, but when you apply that one to somewhere else, it doesn't work quite as nice. So something like Photoshop is not good for this, because once you do an edit in Photoshop, it's very hard to kind of synchronize that kind of edit across a huge array of images. So I'd actually try and stay in Lightroom as an editor as much as possible. So any raw editor that doesn't have this kind of synchronization ability, it's not really much use for me for quite a lot of the paid work that I do. So it's okay if you do something like wildlife or landscape and you're just gone out for a day for one nice photo, then you might not need to use something like Lightroom. You could use Affinity or anything else to do that edit. No problems with that at all. But I'm just explaining to you why I tend to still stay within the ethos of Adobe and why I use Photoshop. But that's not what we're going to do today. I really don't think we need to sort of explain why you might go and why you need an editor. You like Lightroom or Capture One or whatever you want to use. This is about Photoshop and justifying why I might use Photoshop. So let's just get rid of that for now. Okay, so this is we'll have a look at, if we've got time, we'll have a look at two images. This one is of Jen, that's and this one is a landscape. So we've got a landscape image and a portrait work. And basically, I wouldn't, sometimes these edits can take a long time, especially if you're a bit of a noob like I am and you're not very fast with this stuff. I can be here sort of 45 minutes, an hour on one of the images alone. I don't do that for everything. It's those shots that I care about or think they've got potential, print sales and things like that, or client work. But let's just have a quick look at this one first of all. So imagine we've been in Lightroom and we've done some tweaks, and we basically have we've right-clicked the image in Lightroom, and we're going to edit in as a smart object into Photoshop, and this is kind of where we're at. And this is all my edits. If I turn this eye off, this layer off, you can see kind of more like how it started. So I don't know if you can see that before and after kind of difference. So it's just a bit of tidying up here. There's a lot more going on now, and we'll get to that in a minute. What am I doing? It's not letting me zoom in for some reason. Okay, so we'll get to all the edits in a minute. And work out what all these layers are. So I'm not going to teach you how to do this. That's not what the purpose of this video is. It's to kind of justify why I still have to use this kind of Photoshop programs from time to time. The background layer is down here. If I double click it, it's a smart object. It's going to take us into Camera Raw, which is kind of like the Photoshop version of Lightroom. Here it kind of shows you all the work that I did on this image with Jen in the sort of Lightroom before I headed off into Photoshop. So here we can see the profile is Kodak Portra. Can you see it? Is my face isn't covering it. Kodak Portra 162, and I've put the amount at 69. So with these profiles, you can kind of enhance. You can make them more dramatic. You can change the intensity of it. Okay, so it's quite a handy thing. This is from RNI. Really nice images, which I quite like to use. And here it shows you the things that I've maybe done in Lightroom, so like temperature, slight adjustments to the white balance here, and exposure adjustments and things like that. But what I did, what you're not really seeing here, and I did a lot more, is I did actually quite a lot of skin retouching already before I hit into Photoshop. So this is where it gets a bit confusing. Everything you do in Lightroom is considered non-destructive. It means that nothing's really being applied at pixel level until you export that file out. And get the JPEG version or TIFF or whatever else it is you're after. Photoshop can be a bit more destructive, but more advanced, but it can be destructive. Now, with my approach to Photoshop, what I try and do is as much non-destructive as possible, and then do the destructive stuff at the end. This destructive stuff is like cloning and sharpening and all these sorts of things. And the reason I try and do this is that I like to be able to change my mind, because sometimes I have bad days in front of the computer and I'm just not thinking great, or my brightness levels controls are crazy or something like that, and I'm just rendering poorly. It's like a bad day at the office. If I do too much destructive stuff early on, then what happens is it's wasted time. If I have to go back and correct something, it feels like I'm starting from scratch all over again because of that destructive stuff done early on. So we'll get into that a little bit in a minute. But right now, let me just show you, for example, if I bring up the spot removal, you can see there, I did a lot already on Jen before we even hit into Photoshop here. So if I just hold down there, you can see there that Jen did actually have a few spots on that photo shoot that I had to sort of resolve for her. So I tend to go with that, ideology of dealing with stuff that's temporary blemishes on the face. I would deal with that as an artist. If it's permanent stuff, I would maybe talk to them if they like that scar or not and things like that. But certainly this stuff needed cleaned up. So this is how much I did here. And again, this is kind of cool because it's non-destructive, but there is a limit to how much you can do with the spot, heal, and clone tools in Lightroom. Okay, so I just want to show you that. We might come back here later on. But so over here, let's have a look at the actual edits then. So what I'll do is I'll just hide all of them. I'm just going to come down to, actually leave that there, and we'll put on the base. So this is the base, okay? So first things I did, this is the biggest one, is the dodging and burning, okay? So we took, I don't know if you can see this, I don't know how well this is going to translate to YouTube, but we went from here to there, okay? So that's the differences. And this is non-destructive, okay? I used to do frequency separation as a tool to try and sort the skin out of people, but I found that it is destructive. And so if I wanted to change something at a base level, such as, if I go back into Camera Raw here and we change something. So let's say I decided I didn't like Kodak Portra, I wanted to go for something different. I don't know, what should we choose here? Let's just go with that one. It's a little bit different, I guess. Right, so if I went to here, if it did the frequency separation and I made this change, it's stuffed because frequency separation is copying and sampling that Kodak Portra version of my edit. So it just doesn't port across very well. Whereas here it does. So all that dodging and burning I've done before is working again for me here. So I don't have to do that work again. And I have to tell you, this stuff does take a long time. This is about 30 minutes worth of editing here on this dodge and burning. Now I'll leave you the link in the description below. I got this from Irene, brilliant photographer. What's her name? Irene Rudnick, I think that's how you pronounce her. I mean, here this is a 43-minute video alone on just what I just did there on Jen. She's gonna do it on this model here, and so it does take a long time, and she's speeded up in this video as well. So she's really meticulous with it. So it was just a sort of base level sort of cleaning up. Anyway, so yeah, you can change the look of the file quite a lot, and some of those edits will go across, but not all of them. Okay, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But for now, I might just, can I undo that? Get back to my old version? Yes, there we go. Right. So dodge and burn. So dodge and burn for people, I think for me, dodge and burn is two things. You either and this doesn't matter if it's landscape or portrait, but especially for portrait, you are either making the dark parts darker and the bright parts brighter, so it's creating more depth in the face, or you're evening the face out. So if you know you've got a dark and a light patch next to each other, you're going to kind of neutralize it by making the dark part brighter and the light part darker. Okay, and that's essentially what I did here at this dodge and burn level. I'm trying to make things a little bit more uniformed without going too far with it. The advantages of this, I find, it just keeps the skin texture so much better when you go down this route rather than frequency separation. I like to see pores still and things like that. Okay, moving on. What else I did? So a big shout out to Greg Benz and Lumenzia. That's what this is here. You might not have that in your Photoshop. This is a little panel that helps target and do luminosity masking. Again, I'll leave a link in the description video so you can learn more about that. This is a really in-depth and deep program. I mean, it almost requires a long time to learn how to use it, and I'm certainly no expert at all. I still stumble around this a little bit, but yeah, this just allows you to do certain things. So this layer here is a little bit of vignetting here to sort it out, and again a sort of a reverse vignette for the inner and just brightening things up. We'll turn this layer on here. I'm just calming, I don't know if you can see that, I'm just calming down the background light a little bit there. I feel like it was stealing Jen away. And then again, I'm just kind of evening the vignette about a little bit more. And so some of this is just luminosity targeting. I don't know if you can see that. That's what Greg Benz does. It allows you just to target certain tones in an image and play with the brightness levels there and control it. All right. Moving on, that's just a basic curve, so there's nothing really too exciting about that one. This one here is a bit of a quick head dodge and burn. I don't know if you can tell that. I'm just trying to bring a little bit more shadow there and brighten up the bright parts. Maybe even sort out the highlights a little bit there on the cheekbone. And then this layer over here is the torso, and it won't happen until I take these ones on. So I felt as though her skin and her hands were a little bit reddish, kind of not quite as nice as sort of the top half. So this one was just to kind of pull that and sort that out a little bit. And then lastly, skin color. So when you do a lot of dodging and burning on the face like this, you can get some discoloration, or even just in studio, you'll just get it with lights. So this one here, when I toggle this one on, I think you might be able to see I've sorted out my face a little bit. So that pulled those greens that were here, sort of around about this area here, and just sort of like balanced out a little bit more. I don't know if you can see that, how well that's going to turn out. And then lastly, just a bit of eye sharpening here. Again, this won't happen until I take these on. And yeah, I don't know, again, if you can see, it's very subtle. I like subtle more than not. So it went from there to there. Yeah. And with sharpening, you know, you can control the intensity of it as well, with how much you want to show and how much you don't. All right. So all of those things kind of were done with the help of Lumenzia and Irene for her tutorial. Now, up to about this point, eye sharpening is working on a overlay, so you can actually change your render a little bit, and it won't affect it too much. But barring sharpening, almost every and the skin color, everything from say here right down to here, all of these layers are non-destructive. Meaning if I want to for the client, I can go straight back into this one here. Well, let's just do it. And I'll choose a different render again. Let's just make it black and white. All right, just for argument's sake to make it really quick, because this will show the biggest differences easiest. Okay, so I've made it black and white. It's taking a while to think. Now you can see here, this is the mess from the skin color, so I have to turn that one off. That's something I'd have to do again. Again, the eye sharpening was okay. It kind of, because it's an overlay sharpening, it can convert okay. So, but all these other things that I did to the image, I don't have to do them again. So all of these things here, like the torso, the head, you can see that stayed, and especially all these kind of tweaks, the vignette, and all those things can change, and you can control the intensity. You can decide, I want it more, I want it less, and you can change all those sorts of values. This is why I use Photoshop. It feels like I can go back another day and tweak things a little bit more if I look at it 2 days later and think messed up there. Whereas Lightroom, it's just a heap of history panels, and to go back and troubleshoot something feels very difficult when it's at this sort of level of an edit. Most importantly, though, I can choose a different render another day if I like, stylize it better for the client, and things like that dodging and burning, I don't have to do that kind of work again. So it is a bit different from a lot of people, because I think a lot of other people, when they do Photoshop, they actually do a lot of destructive stuff quickly. They'll do all the skin retouching first and all that frequency separation and all that cloning. I try and do that the last, because if I do change the render, I have to do those things again and again and again. And it doesn't take too long, and I'll show you what I mean in a minute. Let's just go back to color version. Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. Hopefully we'll get back there, otherwise I'll have to do it manually. Come on, it's gotta go. I clicked the mouse too much. There we go. So, yeah, as I said, all those things were kind of non-destructive. Here's a clone work. Okay, so the clone work here, we have the suit first of all. So that's just really easy baby stuff. So I'm just taking away fluff and things like that. So you can see there. If we're zooming here, I don't know why it's been really slow to zoom in today. Yeah, so if you can see the suit, all that kind of ooze and hair and fluff, things like that. Let's just deal with that. Okay, so this is a layer you'd have to repeat if you change a render. There's just no way around it. And then flyaways would be hair. So this one here was like this, and then just sort of tidying up the hair a little bit. Okay, now there's this little curl here of her hair. I might ask Jenna if she liked it or wants to keep it, and she wasn't fussed either way, but I did a version where I tackled it and got rid of that curl as well, so we'll see that here. So there you go, you can see the sort of curl disappear. Okay, I think we've done enough there on portrait, but that might give you an idea of why this sort of stuff feels Photoshop's really good for. Let's have a quick look at landscape. Again, this is the same sort of thing. So it started off like this, and then I have edited and gone to a place like this. All right, so let's have a look at what I did here, just to get a bit of a better understanding. Let's go back down here. So this is my base level. Now I actually started with two different versions of this one. This one here has the water a little bit more slow motion, and this one has it a little bit more a quicker shutter speed. Now what I quite like to do with my waterfall work is to actually blend the two together, and that's what I've done here, and you can see that with this luminosity masks. I've decided to bring in some slow-mo into it, and I think there's a nice balance when you get some slow and some fast, so you can see these sort of water pinging away. I quite like that. So that's what that layer is. The next one is, this is my first sort of attempt at kind of sorting out the watercolor. Okay, so this is again a Lumensy thing where you can target certain areas. So the white parts of this image right now is what's been targeted. The dark parts have been left out, and I can fine tune it more with this group layer mask above. So it really is only hitting and affecting sort of the water here. So that's what this is. It's a kind of watercolor, because I know that it looked very bluish to you viewers before. That's because of the render I've chosen. This obviously isn't the colors that it really was, and we'll show you in a minute what the colors more as it was when I took it. This particular render made the water bluish, and I wanted to solve that. But sometimes when you shoot waterfalls, you get the kind of muddy, murky waterfall, and so again, this is the sort of reason I would jump into Photoshop, because you can just target that water, and yeah, just kind of sort it out a lot more and quicker. This layer here is a water boost, so I don't know if you can see, but I'm just kind of bringing up the brightness a little bit there. It's subtle. I don't like blowing the highlights of waterfalls. I really try and keep them under control. And then here's some dodging and burning, so I'll pull back a little bit. And about there. So this is again dodging and burning, non-destructive. Okay, and this area here is a lower half contrast adjustment. So I've just kind of boosted the contrast of the lower half of the frame. Again, this is a little bit more boosting. So that's what's quite nice about Photoshop is these two things are basically repeats of before. So this is waterfall color here, and again a water boost here, and again. And even in dodging and burning, when you're doing portrait work, some people tend to create a layer just for the cheek area, and then a layer just for the nose or something. It's a little bit like that with landscape, and that allows you to go back and go, I've stuffed up the cheek area only. So, or you could adjust the opacity and the intensity of the layer just on the cheek and leave the other places untouched. So it's not a bad idea to make multiple layers of the things you're working on, so you can just tackle them independently. And that's what I like about Photoshop. It's that level of ability to go back, tinker with those layers, and just sort of fine-tune things a little bit more. Okay, and then up here we've got a vignette around the outside, and a little bit more of a vignette on the inside. And this is something I just quite like to do, just pop the middle of the frame a little bit more. It's like a reverse vignetting kind of effect. This is just a general contrast boost, and then a sharpen at the end. So that just kind of makes the rocks sort of gleam a little bit more. Cloning here, again, this is the destructive stuff, cloning and the sharpening. I just took out sort of things that I just felt were a little bit distracting at the edge of the frame. That's it. So let's go. So this was a smart object. So we can go back. Let's just hide this layer. Hide all layers. That's it. Turn this one back on. So let's just go back in the camera raw. Ooh, getting cold now. That's why I'm wearing a hat. It's winter in Australia, so it's a bit chilly inside. So if I just, so this profile I used for this one was PRO-EDU, and it's a hawthorn. So they've got lots of funky different colors that you can use here. So if I just pull the intensity down, this is kind of like a more normal kind of look now. So I went with the kind of fantasy kind of version of this waterfall. But of course, you could, if you like this, you could just work with this. So you hit OK. Now, because I've done 2 edits here, I actually need to do it the same for this one here. Otherwise, when I turn this one back on, it's going to be a merger. So I'll just pull this one down as well. People who know Photoshop will probably be shaking their heads with how many things I'm doing wrong here, but I should have probably merged these layers. So I made a mega smart object or something of these two. There you go. So we've got a more realistic one there. And again, so this is now the water sort of waterfall color fix, and then a water boost. And I can put all these things back on, even though the render is quite different. It's holding on. So all of these things are non-destructive. So I can change my mind if I have a bad day at the office and I feel like I've stuffed up my waterfall, or I want to interpret it 3 different ways at an advanced level. This is why I use this. And we can just continue turning these things on, and all of this works. It only starts to fall apart a little bit when it comes to the kind of sharpening and the cloning and things like that. I don't know if you can tell down here. I want to zoom in. Because I was cloning on the old one, you can really see it. And that's because it's sampling from the old version, not the new. So I'd have to do that kind of cloning again. But as you can see, it wasn't much work here. And smart sharpening, you can put that on as well. So there you go. That was quicker, wasn't it? So that just goes to show you how much you can do non-destructively in Photoshop and get a better print-worthy edit. And that's really all I've got to say. You know, I like to be able to have that freedom to go back and change a render even at a very base level. Whereas if you do too much destructive stuff in Photoshop to begin with, all this cloning and other things, if you hand that version over to your client and they say, don't really like it, it's a lot of work. It's like, well, that's another half day worth of, 3 or 4 edits to be rendered in a completely different way. So I think this is quite this is my way of doing it. It doesn't seem to be what a lot of people do, but it's the best workaround I've had. People do save their work as a TIFF and then take that TIFF file back into Lightroom and change the render at that point. You can do that. I mean, it doesn't work in some ways. I mean, if you started off with a mono version and you saved it as a TIFF and you go back into Lightroom, there's no coming, it's not making that color again. It's stuck mono. But I always find that these renders that I use, like the really nice images and PRO-EDU, all these LUTs and profiles, they do tend, I feel like they do work better on the raw file rather than a TIFF file. So I try and stay with raw as much as possible. But look, I think that really wraps it up. I like I say, I didn't want to. This is not about teaching you how to do this stuff, and there are lots of places to go and learn how to work with layers, create layers, and do all these adjustments. And I'll link some of the links in my description below of places I found very useful and that have helped me on my journey. But I hope this. I just get sick to death of a few arguments of this, like, you know, raw versus straight out of camera. These are just stupid arguments. I shoot straight out of camera all the time. I love it. I love the instant aspect of doing that and getting an image that I think is really worthy. And some of my clients are happy with straight out of camera stuff. Doesn't mean that I don't enjoy this also, and that there's a need for it sometimes. It is case by case scenario for me. All right, I hope you've enjoyed this, and I'll wrap up there. Thanks for watching. Till next time.